Welcome to the Missing Register. My name is Emmy and I am a psychology researcher. In each episode, we listen to experts by experience of school distress and school anxiety. As with every episode, you may not agree with everything said, but there is still so much to learn from what we each share. Today's guests are Daniel and his mum Karen, and I feel incredibly grateful they have agreed to join. They bring such valuable insight into the education system based on their lived experience navigating it together. During Daniel's time at school, they were repeatedly let down by a system that just couldn't bend to meet his needs. He moved between all sorts of settings, mainstream, special, and online school, and each time they were met with the same, or sometimes even worse, challenges, just packaged slightly differently. Through all of this, Daniel was eventually identified autistic and neurodivergent, and now as a young adult, he is working towards the qualifications he needs to study film at university, with the dream of becoming a director. We have split our conversation into 2 episodes, each focused on a topic they chose. Daniel wanted to talk about the role of teachers in school anxiety, and Karen chose to explore what it's like being a parent trying to advocate and navigate this system. We'll head straight into the episode with Karen and Daniel sharing why they were eager to take part in this podcast.
I hope that if people hear what we went through, learn that we've come out of the other side and that things are going well, that will give people some hope and hopefully a bit of courage to keep going if things are difficult.
And also, we've spoken to a lot of people who just didn't get the same kind of result that we did for one reason or another. So being able to speak to them and kind of relay our experience is also really important, because there's a lot of people who just don't follow through or get bullied or intimidated down, and it's really important that doesn't happen for the sake of the kid, if nothing else.
So I guess you both put in what you'd be interested to talk about. I'm just interested, I mean, clearly I know the answer, but why did you choose that? Why was teachers something you were interested to talk about today?
Because it's the part of this sort of equation, if you will, that never gets addressed. There's the parents, there's the kids, and there's the teacher. They're the 3 people involved. And the blame is always put on one of the other 2. It's the kid's fault, they're misbehaving, or it's the parent, they're not disciplining them properly. And either parents will be afraid, or they will feel like the school knows better than them, or one of a million reasons, and just won't question the idea that they might just not know what they're doing, or they might actively be not helping on purpose for one reason or another. And for the kids, even if they can recognize that there is a problem with the teachers, which they might not realize where an issue is coming from, they can always tell that something is bothering them. And if you don't examine all 3 parts of this, you don't actually reach a good solution.
Yeah.
Especially because I know from experience there are those like people in the education system who know this is a problem and just can't do anything.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I can tell is immensely frustrating for them.
I think when we talk, I think we'll try and kind of put it within that perspective of having agency to do things that would have helped, but then also these constraints that we know exist. So I guess kind of before we delve into teachers, which is what the focus of this particular episode is, I'm wondering if you can kind of briefly walk us through your school journey.
There was incidents all the way through primary school where Daniel's behaviour didn't conform to what was expected of him, and he got into trouble a lot. So we were very used to being called into school and being told what he'd done, or he would be kept behind, and we'd get a long list of everything he'd done wrong that day. So it was clear that he struggled from nursery school, didn't really make friends, just had trouble at every stage really, and outside of school, going to clubs, taking part in sports, always very enthusiastic and always wanted to try. He just, everything was difficult. He had difficulty following the rules, knowing what behaviour was appropriate in what place.
So going into secondary school, we were already looking for the diagnosis. And similarly, they tried to convince us there was nothing. And then once we finally had it, it then became a fight about getting what that then needed. And when that didn't work, we moved on to a specialist school, who, if anything, were even worse. And did that even last a year?
No, it didn't last a
Yeah.
year.
And then we tried an online school who were really good, but there was just trouble getting a proper venue for examinations, and also that was around when lockdown hit, so it was just a whole mess. So yeah, we've moved on from that. Currently, we're doing. I'm doing a BTEC to kind of get the qualifications to get into university.
It's interesting you say to accommodate that. Was the diagnosis quite important at that time
Usually.
to make
Well,
changes?
well, because without it, they had no interest in engaging in the conversation.
Right.
This is when I was thinking about this on the way here. The more I thought about it, it's like, what is? There's a question that you sort of posed in the sort of preemptive stuff, which was like, what about the system limits them from, what was the exact wording? It was, what aspects of the school system pressure teachers into behaving certain ways? I think that's the wrong way to phrase the question, because I think in many ways it's not that they're pressured into doing things, it's that no one stops them. It's like there is no one keeping an eye on them to make sure that they help people who have those special needs. And because there's no benefit to it, unless they get external funding for it, which, I mean, the primary school I went to openly admitted they didn't want to help us because they wouldn't get any funding for it. So it's like, if there's no benefit to them, they just don't do it.
That's such an interesting shift, isn't it, in that question of rather than
It's not
no
about
incentive.
It's not about what makes them do it. It's about what stops them. Nothing does. No one's checking. Ofsted don't really care. That's not their prerogative to check those things.
Yeah.
They don't talk to students. Well, whenever Ofsted came, I was always hidden or literally asked not to come in. So, because just in case they took an interest. So it's just the thing of it's not a matter of what makes them do it. It's a matter of what stops them. And the answer is nothing. So without a diagnosis, literally nothing. They have no interest in helping you, because why would they?
I think as well, though, it can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because although I'd say getting a diagnosis was hugely important for us, because it did open doors to other help that we were able to access, but also within the school, it was almost okay. They looked at the diagnosis. Okay, he's autistic. That means X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing.
And so
it was a stock response.
You went from one box to another box.
And that's the trick. That's kind of how the education system is built. Is you're in this box, you're in this box. People of different needs go in different boxes, and when someone just doesn't fit any of them, the response is, okay, we don't care anymore. We're just gonna either push you into one of these boxes, or you're going to go away. Which we thought the specialist school would be better at, but they were so much worse.
That's interesting.
Because the problem was the secondary school had
really hard to do.
blank it out. Had boxes.
Yeah.
They had multiple boxes, and for the best it was small in the world, it felt like they were trying to stretch them where they could. I would never say that they weren't trying. They didn't know what they were doing, and quite often it felt like individuals were done talking to us.
Yeah.
But it felt like the head teacher and some of the other people were trying to help.
Yeah.
The special school didn't care. They had a box. This is how we do it. If it doesn't work for you, go away. By the end, they were literally just saying, don't come in. Because it looks better for them if I'm not showing up and I'm still on their register.
There's a lot of resistance to bend to meet needs, and when the autism diagnosis arrived, the only bending which seems like it still didn't really happen, was around, oh, well, autism means blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
so we need to meet blah, 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 blah,
Well, it's not bending, it's just shifting.
Yes.
That's the thing, the assumption, is that once you get the diagnosis, they become flexible. They don't. You move from this box to this box. That's it. Maybe your space of ability to flex on things widens a little, but for the most part, they've just changed how they're operating. They haven't actually become flexible, because if you push at the boundaries of that box, they still fight you. It's no different. Again, because the special school was a specialist school that said they know what they're doing, they don't have an option for if you don't fit. They have, here's how we do it. If it doesn't work for you, not our problem.
So it's still rigid, it's just rigid in a different way.
It's more rigid, because the secondary school at least tried. They tried to make allowances. They weren't very good at it, but...
No, I felt at the special school, when it didn't work for Daniel, the emphasis they put on it was very much, then there's something wrong with you. we're the experts. You know, we've got lots of happy children here. If your child isn't one of them, then there's
You're the
something wrong
problem.
with.
Yes, because you're the outlier as opposed to we're not
Yeah.
we're.
Which is just an utter lack of self-examination.
Yeah.
Like,
So taking a step back from the resistance, what were they resisting doing? Like, what were the unmet needs that you had that would have helped you had they?
okay, so flexibility in general. Like, part of the problem was that, like, as someone with both heightened anxiety and these sort of special needs, uncertain schedules are a nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't know what's coming, not just, oh, I don't know what class I'm doing today, because there were days I'd walk in and the schedule was just wrong. Like, oh, we're doing history today. It's like, what do you mean? But also, it's like, you don't know what your lesson's going to be. It can be anything from we're sitting down and writing an essay to, oh, we're doing a like spoken presentation tomorrow. Like, get on it. And that's normal. You don't normally know your lesson going in, but it's nightmarish if you don't handle like that kind of stress and surprise well, especially when it can change like on an instant. There's no ability to like get up and move if you need to, and there's also no understanding if you're having a problem. Like, you know, if I was having an issue in class, I couldn't ask them because the response would be sit down, shut up.
And that's just making the issue 10 times worse because you know that person, you're stuck with it. There's no help coming.
Movement breaks were really important to Daniel because the tics, just as his anxiety got worse in the lessons,
The tics get worse,
they
yeah.
got worse and they got worse, and he just had to get up.
Obviously, that's a very unique situation. Not everyone with autism has tic disorder, but for me, you need that mobility. You need that ability to move. Not just like get up and get out of class, but literally just like I need to be able to like move my arms. I need to be able to, you know, crack my neck or like mess around with my hands without being bothered about it. The amount of times I would be like, I don't know, like flexing my hands on a table or something and like get like, stop it, was like not literally whacking at us, but like that kind of like gesture of just like, stop doing that. What are you doing? That's weird. There was a woman at that secondary school who ran something called like a nurture group, which was like ostensibly for people with like not necessarily special needs, but people who maybe didn't get on like super well in like classes and things, or like didn't handle group situations. She was awful, really rigid, really nasty, quite frankly. And for a while, I had her with me in maths lessons, and it's like if I lifted my head up from the paper, it was like almost literally just stop it.
Pushing it back down.
Yeah, like
that was one of the biggest problems we encountered, really, because after the diagnosis, the school decided that Daniel needed one-to-one assistance. So he had someone with him all the time, and I think he had probably 3 or 4 people over the time he was there, none of whom he liked, none of whom seemed to like him. The impression they gave was that this was a bother, that they didn't want to be doing it.
it wasn't the impression, that's just how they clearly felt.
We're in a position of being told that we should be grateful for all this help we were being given.
Yeah, like they've done this nice thing for us, and it's like, but it's made the problem worse.
It's often seen as we need more support, we need more of it. But actually, what is the quality of the support you're providing?
Quality versus quantity is a particular equation that schools seem to be quite bad at.
Yeah.
When it comes to these sort of issues.
You've spoken before about kind of teacher dislike and almost that resentment of what you were saying before, of how it was almost obvious to you that they didn't like you. How did, at that time, if we stepped back to how it was then, how did you perceive that, and what were they doing?
I mean, first of all, if someone's glaring at you every day, it's not hard to figure out they don't like you. I'm not amazing, okay, I'm better now, but I wasn't great at social cues then. But if you come into class and someone's just staring you down, and it's like, yeah, you don't like me. At that secondary school, it was everyone. It was the teaching assistants. It was quite a few of the like form teachers I ended up having. Basically, the only people, like in terms of staff, that didn't have that were one of my form teachers, who is one of only 2 teachers I can say I've had a wholly positive experience with. At least outside of the online school, because they were all great. But so it's them, because they were always nice. I mean, they were quite stern, but like they never felt like they were angry. Yeah. So they were never like that. And the woman whose job it was ostensibly to deal with special needs kids. And the only reason I think she didn't hate me was because she didn't understand. She's a really good example of what this problem was, because it was her job to make these boxes, to make this box for special needs person. That was functionally her job. And she just clearly didn't understand the idea that I wouldn't fit that. So whenever I said something that was like not within that box, she didn't get angry the way the others did, but she just seemed so confused.
Right.
As if it's like what do you mean? This is how it works. This is how we deal with this. Like the chart says, do this.
So it's almost that very rigid understanding that means that if you don't fit that exact box, there's literally no capacity.
I've met people who have this experience of like, oh, they're struggling in school and teachers are either actively not helping or just don't understand. Like what am I supposed to do? This isn't like, I mean, they're not trained for it. That's also the thing. It's like, it's not regulation really to do special needs training. So quite a few teachers literally don't know what to do. And how are you supposed to if you've never been taught to understand it? You know, I wouldn't know how to like splint a broken leg because I've never been taught to do it.
I'm interested in going back into that shifting of the question to there not being an incentive. Is that what you think might have underpinned some of that? I don't know, what would you call it? How teachers felt, like resentment? I don't
Yes.
know.
No, 100%. It's we are being made to do this.
Resentment and frustration. I think they resented having to change how they did things, but then
Got frustrated
were
when
frustrated that
we came back to them and were like, this isn't working.
Mhm.
Because that's the thing. It's like, because they're resenting us for even having to do it, they make the bare minimum change, or they don't pay any attention to what effect a change might have. And then when it doesn't work, and we come back to them and say that, then they're angry.
And the relationship in our case deteriorated from that, confusion, frustration to anger. And it got to the point where we just felt like we were the enemy.
And the problem is, that was every school. It's every time we had this fight. First school, second school, special school.
So there was no collaboration though.
Of course not. Well, actually, no, it didn't happen in first school, but only because they like literally gaslit you into thinking that there wasn't a problem for multiple years because they wouldn't get a payout. Again, that's not me being like, oh, misjudging motives. They functionally said that they just were like, oh, we knew there was a problem, but we didn't think we'd get any sort of support for it, so we're not going to help. Like, we just didn't want to talk about it. Again, the special school, by the end, were just saying, don't come in, and you'll stay on the register. And I find it very hard not to think that has something to do with the fact that they were getting, by that point, extra funding for me. So it's like, oh yeah, just don't come in, we'll keep collecting that, and we don't have to deal with you.
How aware of this, all of this, were you at the time? You know, because you've had some years to reflect.
When are you asking me? If you're asking me, first school, not at all. Didn't have a clue. Secondary school, some idea, but a lot of it was happening behind the scenes. Special school, by that point, I'd been like, because I'd been out of school for over a year at that point. Like, there was a huge gap between secondary school and going to special school, during which time I was with you the entire time, getting the full brunt of like that sort of conversation. So by the time I was in the special school, I was fully aware of what was happening. I knew at the time what the problems were and how you were dealing with them.
It's something I struggled with because I was really aware that the negative feelings I had towards school were undoubtedly, being communicated to Daniel. I worried when he was about to move to the special school that he wouldn't give it a good try because he'd go into it thinking, well, this is going to fail because it's failed before. Because I have to admit, I wasn't confident myself that it would work.
And I'll admit that I definitely didn't go in unbiased. But, I mean, from the off, they were making the wrong calls. Because I'd been out of school for over a year. And I hadn't been doing full school when I was there at secondary school. But I hadn't been doing full days at that point. So when their proposal was, right, one day, we'll do a half day, and then you're in full immediately, the whole time. That was never going to work. That was going from nothing to full blast immediately. And you know what happened? I did 2 or 3 days, and then I wasn't in for a week.
I think of a feature of Daniel's condition that I don't actually know how common it is, but he finds it really difficult to have demands placed upon him of any kind, really. And obviously in school, you have constant demands put on you and things that you have to react to quickly. And the pressure that put on him, I could see in first school, I could see it building. He would be able to go for at first maybe a few weeks, but as it got worse, it would only be a few days, and then he was ill. It would come out physically because he just couldn't take any more pressure. And that aspect of the condition, I don't think we ever successfully addressed really, and never really got any help.
We've sort of like at this point where we are now, dealing with things, we've kind of got that unlocked, but we never got help for that. We just figured it out.
So what have you?
Well, at the moment with the BTEC thing, it's basically been the thing of like, because of how it works, we're setting the schedule, so we're working like usually in the evenings for about an hour on it. I'm getting supports. Like, I'm not good at like, I'm going to sit down and diligently take notes. I need to talk to someone to get my thoughts out.
Yeah.
So I'll be there in front of the laptop. She'll be with me. She'll have read the coursework as well, and I will just bounce things off her as I write, both to make sure, because I'm not great at writing academically, which is another reason why the way things are set up isn't great. Both to check that I'm writing it in a way that isn't horribly conversational and will just get what I've written rejected, but also because I just think better if I can talk to someone. The way it's actually set up works really well to alleviate that problem, because it's in short bursts, it's late in the day, so I've had all day to relax functionally, and I have someone that I trust to talk to and get my ideas out, that I know will be honest with me if I've said something ridiculous.
If you'd just had that at school, I wonder what difference that might have made if you'd had somebody you trusted, where you could work in that way.
It's one of those things of like, that wouldn't work in a typical mainstream school because it's slow and it requires you to trust someone, which is hard to accomplish. Yeah. But at the same time, that's almost just evidence that there are just people to whom mainstream school just doesn't work, which is sort of one of the points I settled on while thinking about this.
That mainstream doesn't work for some people.
Well, the thing about putting people into boxes is that people don't live in squares. Yeah, it's a metaphor I first learned when reading about like how districts are done in like America, because I don't know, I was bored that night. But it's like, you can't just put boxes on a grid because people don't live in boxes. You've got to draw things carefully, like when you're mapping. And the same is true for education. Nobody lives in a box. Nobody thinks in a box. You can't just set down a grid and be like, if you're like this, you're like that. If you're this, you're that. Everyone's an individual. Yeah. And that means that the fact that our education is not individualized makes it non-functional. Yeah. The entire purpose of our education system isn't to teach people, it's to get them ready to be factory drones, functionally. Yeah. That's what it's for. That's what it was invented for back in like Victorian days, when we sort of formalized our education system properly. The point of this system is to get people ready for the office grind. So it doesn't work because people don't live like that.
No, and how much do you think, because I've been thinking about this a lot, is the system directly corresponds to what we expect people to do as jobs. So how much do you think it can actually change given that bigger constraint?
I think that's changing a lot, isn't it? Especially recently. I think, the idea that you come out of school and get a job for life, which was true years ago, just isn't. And people are working in so many different ways, even, regular, perhaps normal office jobs, people are working from home.
I mean, things are going to have to change, because that idea of like slaving away in an office cubicle is dying. Not because like that method of work is dying, but because my generation is just refusing to do it. In the same way that like that will happen, it's like if these companies keep trying to force people into cubicles, their businesses will just shutter because no one will work for them. Yeah. At the same time, this is true of education. If they keep trying to force people into these boxes where they don't fit, parents are becoming more aware, kids are becoming more like online and thus more aware of these kind of issues because they're shared freely. They'll just stop going. And these old education systems will crumble.
I think it's kind of sad to think of education in that way as well. It's really, I don't know, it's quite kind of a limited way of looking at it. You'd hope that kids get much more out of school than just the ability to get a job. And when we were talking about taking Daniel out of school because his needs weren't being met, the thing that was always said to us was that he wouldn't develop well as a person because he'd be isolated, he wouldn't have that social interaction.
And clearly they were right, but...
Well, our argument always was that he's not getting that at school, which was part of the reason we wanted to take him out.
I mean, again, this is an anecdote, but when I left that secondary school, I really only hung on to like one friend. And the day after I left, I met up with him, And he told me that at school that day, all the people I considered my friend group had been talking about how glad they were I was gone.
So that logic of he'll be isolated, it's like, but he's not getting that at school,
Nope.
so...
Because I was weird and that all of them just didn't like me. They, they were perfectly willing to be friendly with me, perfectly willing to talk to me. I liked them, but the instant I was gone, I was just that weird kid they didn't like.
So since you've left, though, it sounds like you've got a wonderful friendship group.
Yeah.
So it's not that you needed school in order to obtain these, relationships.
But I wouldn't belittle how hard that was at the time, because when teachers said to me, more or less, you're ruining your child's life, it struck home, and it really worried me.
Because they fancy themselves the experts.
I think if parents are going through that, I wouldn't want them to think it was something we did lightly. It got to the point where we didn't have a choice. It was he couldn't. He was hiding under his bed. He was so terrified of school. It got so bad we had to do something. But it was not easy to hear teachers say, you're ruining his life.
And I could tell it was getting to you, even at the time.
Well, it's a hard thing to hear as a parent. Of course it, yeah.
You don't.
Yeah. But yeah, I think what was really disappointing, and it's kind of the thing from all of these sort of prenups I really want to get to, was how disappointing the special school was. Because we've talked a lot about the primary and secondary school and their issues, but I think what is really important for kids and parents to know when it comes to teachers is that I was thinking about this because it's if there's one thing I'd want to take away from this whole thing, it's advocate for yourself. And that's difficult because some people can't, but you have to at this point until the system gets better, and it might never get better. You need to advocate for yourself because they never will advocate for you. Nowhere demonstrated that better than the specialist school because they were meant to be the experts and they were just so bad at it. One particular thing that you've made note of in here, the breakout room.
You told me about to ask. You just wrote, I think, ask me about the breakout room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I'm ready.
I continued to be a problem at the specialist school, partly because by that point, I'd long since gotten over the, I kind of in retrospect, I can look back at my secondary school experience and be like, they were trying. At the time, I was just scared and not really thinking about it. And in the immediate aftermath, I was not giving them any credit. And I don't know how much they deserve, but I was willing to acknowledge that. But the specialist school just weren't trying. It's they tried the one thing they knew how to do. It didn't work. And from that point on, they were done with us. There were just so many occasions of it. I got into shouting matches with teachers. I had rows with people because they were just being so obtuse and difficult. Yeah. There's an occasion I always remember, which was right before the whole breakout room thing happened, which was we were talking about I
think it was Mohammed.
It was Mohammed, yeah, it was that story. But it's it was just one of those figures who I didn't know very much about. I think it might have been the Buddha, but it's been too long for me to remember exactly who it was about. But it was basically, we've talked a bit about them, make a sort of comic strip description of their life. And it's just meant to be this thing of oh, you've read about them, draw some pictures, okay. But to me, when you say comic, my mind went to your Beanos, your Garfield, these silly things. And I was that seems really disrespectful. And me being a bit ignorant, I was I don't know, this idea seems kind of disrespectful. I'm not going to do it.
I don't think that's ignorant. I think that's...
Yeah. Well, I didn't know. And it's again, maybe I was misunderstanding the task. But they got so angry with me because I just wouldn't do it because I was this seems kind of disrespectful. I feel weird about this. I don't want to do it. Because the next class was break, go out in the yard. I was not allowed out. I was kept in the room. And when I continued to refuse to do it, she started yelling at me. I yelled back because at that point I was just kind of annoyed and done. I think I ended up because I think you were coming to get us at that point. I ended up drawing a couple of just stick figure things because I was she's literally not going to let me out of this room if I don't do anything. And then I just left. And after that, not long after that, they introduced the breakout room, which was an unused classroom downstairs where I would be sat with a couple of the teachers who weren't on duty. I would go into school, I would go to the breakout room, and I would stay there until she picked me up partway through the night. I wasn't doing work. I wasn't really doing games or anything. I wasn't doing anything to like socialize or anything. I was just there. Functionally, I would show up to school, get put in a box for a few hours, and then go home. I wasn't doing anything.
Like, what did they say to you as the reasoning for that?
I don't think they ever gave me a reason. They just started doing it. Did they say anything to you?
I think the idea was that they thought that the school environment was too difficult for Daniel to cope with, and they thought that sensory isolation would help him. So the room was darkened, wasn't it? And they had weighted blankets and things, and I think you slept a few times, didn't you?
This is the thing, because there's two different things. There's the breakout room, which was just a classroom. That wasn't particularly darkened with blankets. No. There was also, in the school, they had like basically just somewhere you were meant to go to rest. It was a dark room, they had weighted blankets, and there was a little thing in the bubble, in the middle of the room, it's like a column with bubbles in it and like colored lights. It was just meant to be a relaxing place. So in the classroom, I was just sat there doing nothing for like an entire half day.
That you just reminded me, that was to do with not disrupting the lessons. That was because after the incident with the cartoon, they said that they had to think about the whole class, and that if you were going to be disruptive, then you'd have to be put on your own. Yeah, I think so.
And then there's at least one day, but it probably happened more than once, where I was taken into the sort of sensory room, which was meant to be for people to relax, and was just allowed to sleep through the day. So it was just a case of like, it had gone from, we're going to try and accommodate you, to, okay, you don't fit, but you need to try, to, right, we're done dealing with you. Those were the 3 steps. Here's our way of doing it. Oh, it didn't work. Go away. They tried the breakout room, which obviously wasn't acceptable. Yeah. And then the next step was just don't come in. Well, after a couple of weeks of that being just a bad solution, we obviously started at that point considering other options.
When we had a meeting, I said to them that I couldn't see the point in him coming into school to sleep.
And their response to it was just, all right, don't come in then.
That was the point at which it was a person from the council who said to us, look, if you just keep him off, more or less don't make a fuss, you won't be prosecuted. We'll just let things go. But obviously that wasn't acceptable to us, because we had a bright child who was perfectly capable of achieving, and we weren't going to be happy with him just sitting at home doing nothing.
Not when there's also a legal right for him to be educated.
Education is a right. It's not a neat benefit.
Yes,
it's a right.
Exactly.
And it was a complete misunderstanding of what we were saying. What we were trying to do was get a good education for our son. It wasn't
they seem to
get him out of school.
And many times in the system, they seem to be under the impression that if we weren't interested in the exact box they thought we should fit in, we just didn't want to engage. That was their assumption. It's like, if you're not in this system we've established, then we're just ignoring you, because clearly you're not interested. Which is part of why, again, I feel like it's more about the system allowing them not to do something than enforcing them doing something. I don't think that the school system necessarily encourages, like, you need to press people into shape. It's more so that, like, there's no benefit to them doing anything other than the bare minimum, so they don't.
It was definitely true for us at that point that education and social development couldn't happen together. That's the conclusion I came to. I could see that Daniel needed that social interaction that school should bring, but he couldn't do that in an educational setting. It just wasn't possible.
Which is why I started doing things like
charities.
Charity meetups. Obviously, like engaging with my friend group. Like, it's just finding any way to have that kind of social contact without it having to be in a classroom.
To make it very clear, like the mental health cost of that. I mean, hiding in your bed because you're so scared of school sounds like a natural reaction. Yeah. What was kind of that like? Like, how were you?
It's horrifying, because I think the thing that's also is, like, when people picture anxiety, you think about, like, kind of hyperventilating back against the wall. It's like, it's fight or flight. It's fear. Yeah. And you respond to it like something you're scared of. So, like, when it gets really bad, it's like hiding under the covers, throwing things, like just anything you can do to avoid the situation. I planned an escape route from, like, my secondary school. Never figured one out for the special school. Wasn't there long enough. But I figured out a route out of the secondary school in case I ever just needed to leave. The fact that I even thought of that Because that's the thing. It's like, yeah, I can imagine like now, like having a good way out of somewhere is a good idea. When you're at a place that you don't want to be, having a good way out is ideal.
Yes.
But when you're like 12, you should not be thinking of escape routes.
I think that just shows the extent of the anxiety and the fear.
I started doing it at the special school. I just never figured one out because they had much bigger fences.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, I probably could have walked right out the front door and they wouldn't have cared less. They'd have opened the gate for us. I'd have been leaving early. That would have been exactly what they'd wanted.
If we could go back to kind of what would have helped, and the fact you say that there's no incentive to kind of bend to meet needs, do you think, I don't know, things about how the school system is set up? I know you were talking about these boxes that exist that do almost limit teachers or gives them a reason for why they can't bend to meet needs.
It's both. It's not a case of it limits them or it's both.
Yeah.
It gives an excuse to those who aren't interested, who want to just adhere to a system, or who just don't like kids and are just doing a job.
Yeah.
Like, because those people exist. They're definitely the exception. Most people get into teaching because to some degree they want to. But you'll find those people who like clearly couldn't cut it in the army, so they're just annoying kids instead. If it's not like just an excuse, it's a restriction. Because it prevents them from doing anything. Because there's a system for this, which means they have to follow the system. And we've met those people. Like, again, the one good like form teacher I had at that like secondary school clearly wanted to help. And they just couldn't do anything. Because they had no power in the situation. Because it wasn't their job to deal with special needs kids. And even if it was, there are rules that they have to follow or they get in trouble. It's, like, what are you supposed to do?
And that teacher told me that when she'd begun teaching about 20 years before, there'd been so many different types of school, so that if one system didn't work for you, there was usually somewhere where you could find where you fitted a bit better. But she said that the government, successive governments had made the education system so schools were cookie cutters, of replicas of each other. And so if you didn't fit in one, you weren't going to find a system that worked for you, which seems a real shame.
Yes, I mean there's academies where it's the exact lesson at the exact same time, and you can't run over, and it's got to be that amount. And if you don't, it's literally like almost a robot at the front just doing it. And that's every school within the academy of kind of year 8. Okay, this time they learn this, and every single school is doing the same thing at the same time. So if you then have children who can't do that or struggle to do that, or just something else would work better, it's not necessarily that they can't. Where's the flexibility?
Yeah, that's right.
And of course, when you get into like the upper rules, you're getting into regulation, you're getting into stuff that's out of the hands of schools. Like that's the thing. It's like some of this comes down to individual school policies. Some of this comes down to government mandates.
Yes.
And well, unfortunately, most of the people who run our governments are idiots. So I think what's missing here is, because you've got parents and you've got teachers. And on the far back, you've got the government. What's missing somewhere in the system is advocates. This is kind of like the sort of conclusion I kind of came to thinking about this, is what really needs to exist is a group whose job it is to advocate for people. If you're going to court, you like, I don't know much about the legal system in this country, but at least in like America, where I'm more familiar because of television, you get like, if you do not have a lawyer, you get represented. I think somewhere in this system, there needs to be a representative. Whether it's like someone who works at the school or even someone who works in the council, whose job it is to fight for people like this. Because some parents literally can't. We know someone who has a kid who had a very similar or debatably worse experience than me with the same special school, but she can't advocate for them because she's a single mother. She needs him to go to school and not have a problem. I'm stealing the way you put this. To go to school and not have a problem. Otherwise, things don't function. Yeah. But obviously, it's not working, which is why there's been multiple times he's ran away from school. Done the thing that I planned to do. Unlike us, we were kind of lucky. We've always been in a decent situation financially, enough that you didn't have to work, and have only gotten better. And because of that, you were there to advocate for me and did it really well. But you get people like that who can't, who literally can't advocate for themselves. And that means that if there's any pushback, they almost have to relent. Or they don't know any better.
I agree, there's such inequity there, isn't there?
The thing is, as well, it can't be an outside charity group because they'll get the same response. No one will listen to them. It's no different from a parent talking, because at the end of the day, if you're causing a problem, you're a concern to be shut out. And a charity group only has so much power to make that fight. Someone with an official position, again, either at the school or the government, needs to be there to advocate for these people.
So what was your experience with educational psychologists?
We saw one for maybe had a 20-minute chat. An education psychologist came to our house, and I think it was in the process of going for the education, health and care plan, because we were one of the first test cases in Northumberland for the education, health and care plan, and an educational psychologist came to our house for, as I say, for about 20 minutes, and he just did an assessment for the council, really. I don't think we even got the report.
But that's the thing. It's like, their job is to do an assessment, not to advocate.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. I guess what I'm saying is, like, I'm not talking about someone who has literally, they do not have any other role that would compromise like their ability to be unbiased. Their role in this process is just to advocate for the parent and the kid, because if you don't have that person who has some weight to throw around and some ability to, fight up the chain and get things done, nothing happens. And the problem is, because, what the message I'd ultimately want people to take from this is, parents, advocate for your kid. And, kid, advocate for yourself. Do not be afraid to tell these people they're wrong.
Yeah.
Because you know you, and the parent probably knows the kid better than the teacher does. Yeah. Advocate for yourself. But not everyone can. Some people don't have the resources to, some people don't know how to, and some people just get scared. A school, or indeed a council or government, is a big, scary thing with a lot of power that says it knows better. Especially they say they know better when they don't.
Yes.
Because they need to look like they know what they're doing. So there needs to be someone in the middle to advocate, because if there isn't, there's no one pushing for you if you can't push for yourself.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think there probably, there was, in terms of when, again, as part of setting up the education, health and care plan, we were given, I think they were called a case manager or case worker, and we had 3 of the time the process of setting this up. But to be honest, they weren't an awful lot of help, because they seemed overworked. Quite often, they would make vague promises, but when it came to the next appointment to see them, you'd be going over the same stuff again. And it just felt like we were on the spot. We were there, we were the ones every day trying to get Daniel out of the car and into the school, or get him out from under his bed. The only help we were offered with that kind of practical day-to-day stuff was when the special school offered to send someone to pick him up, and they said that they would drag him out. Obviously, I told them that wasn't acceptable, and there's no way I was having that. But I know because I know someone who does the role at another school, that is something that still happens. Schools send someone to check up where the child is, and if necessary, drag them out of their bedroom in their pajamas and into school. And that's considered a good thing.
It's always struck me as well how, again, part of the reason I think you need this kind of outside advocacy system is because the rules can be so different from school to school. Because I've said this to you before, the secondary school I went to has effectively a sister school, literally right next door. And from what little I've gleaned about their systems from when I was there talking to them, they just seem so much better. Like, they so much more know what they're talking about and know what they're doing. I'd spoken with their headmaster a couple times because he'd come to our school just to chat. Very nice man. I told him once, just because I was having a bit of a bad day, and he clearly noticed like what I was dealing with. And I remember him just saying, it's like, if you need to talk, like, you can like come over. And I just remember thinking, God, I wish that was the person we were dealing with. Because the head teacher at the school I was at was nice, but she wasn't involved. They're literally next door. And I've always thought after that conversation, where would I be right now if I'd gone there instead? Because I could have done.
Unfortunately, as you said, they're now part of the same academy.
Oh yeah.
Since that day, so
Yeah. No,
it's
things that
probably not true anymore.
it's probably not true anymore.
It sounds like there's an approaching of kind of with curiosity as opposed to already assuming that they know. It's like if you kind of were a teacher or anyone who worked with you who was just coming at it with, well, that's interesting that didn't work. I'm curious kind of why.
But that's never the attitude, because that would involve them wanting to find a solution. And the solution they want to find is the problem stop. That's the thing. If you're in search of a result and not a solution, you won't care about what the solution is. Like, the result they wanted was just for the problem to go away, which meant that any solution was acceptable that would cause that to stop. And ideally, the less work they have to do, the better.
So, just to kind of round it up, what message would you send to teachers? Either the teachers you did have or just any teachers who, what advice would you give?
To the teachers that tried, I'm sorry that you're in this situation, that you have no ability to help these people because of the situation you're put in by like either upper management at the school or by the rules you have to follow. And to all of the teachers who are like blindly following these rules or doing the bare minimum, you are hurting children. You are, whether you mean to or not, causing a genuine problem that can mess up people's lives. I have met people who are going to have worse lives because of this treatment. And I do not think I can have any more just hate for a person than someone who looks a child in the face and actively makes the choice to damage their life.
I mean, there's just this long-lasting trauma. It's not something that just stops in school. It's formative. And I guess in terms of what you would say to other young people, it's advocate. Am I right with that?
And to parents, yeah.
Yes.
But to the kids, don't be scared, because that's kind of the result they want, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. They want you to be scared and back down. They want you to stop advocating for yourself, because that means you stop being their problem. Do not let that happen. Be your own advocate and be confident that you know what's best. I'm sure it is the case for some people that they need a bit of advice, that they don't know everything. Yeah, no one knows everything. But you know how you feel. And if you are struggling, advocate for yourself. Do not let them tell you that they know you better than you do. And that goes for parents as well. Make sure your kid is a part of these conversations, because you can't claim to know everything about them.
Yes.
But also, do not let the school bully you into thinking, or the council, or anyone, into thinking that you know less than they do. Because odds are, they know way less than you do. Because you are the one who's been knowing this person, dealing with this person, trying to help them. And they just want you to stop talking. That's all that's going through their heads. They'll tell you they're trying to help, they'll tell you they're doing everything they can, but at the end of the day, the root of the problem, the rot, is that they just want you to shut up. And if you do shut up, then you've lost.
Do you have anything else just before we move on to the next one that you want to add?
I think what you said before is 100% right. If they just don't assume you know what someone needs. Listen to what parents and children are saying, and just have an open mind.
Yeah.
Because, I know we're saying that, I know it's true that teachers have a lot of constraints about what they're able to offer. But within that, there is flexibility. And sometimes we found the smallest change, the smallest kindness just made our lives so much better.
Thank you so much for listening. The next episode with Daniel and Karen about parental advocacy will be out soon. If you have a story or professional experience about school anxiety and non-attendance that you'd like to share, please email themissingregister@gmail.com. Take care and catch you next time.